Good morning, well good afternoon. It's Christmas Day and I'm getting ready to make some of my bread machine bread. Now I was told that YouTube's going to start being a little more touchy on showing labels and stuff like that. So I'm not going to show any labels, and I've got a lot of my stuff pre-measured. Now here's my recipe. It's 1 cup water, 2 tablespoons vegetable oil, 2 tablespoons molasses, 1 tablespoon gluten, Vidal wheat gluten, 1 tablespoon sugar, 1/2 teaspoon salt, 1 tablespoon caraway seeds, 2 tablespoons unsweetened cocoa powder, 1½ cups rye flour, 1½ cups bread flour, 1½ teaspoons dry yeast. Now that's going to be my basic recipe there, but I'm going to switch it up a little bit. And because I'm switching it up, I have to change some measurements, but not add more, just be sure that I add certain things. So, I have 1 cup water in my bread machine, and I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of vegetable. Okay, I've added my 1 cup of water, 2 tablespoons vegetable oil. I used a combination of vegetable oil and olive oil. I added my 2 tablespoons of molasses, my 1 tablespoon of gluten, my 1 tablespoon of sugar, my 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now, I don't have any caraway seeds, so I'm leaving out the caraway seeds. And I did add 2 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa powder. Now, on my, as you can see on the flour there, you're supposed to use 1½ cups rye flour and 1½ cups bread flour. Well, I am adding, instead of the rye flour, all the rye flour, I'm adding flaxseed meal, wheat germ, and oat bran. So I'm using that as part of my rye flour. I'm still using the 1½ cups bread flour. So here's my flour all measured out. Now notice I'm using a liquid measure here. I use the dry measure to measure the flour. I have my flour all measured out here. Be sure whenever you're doing measuring, usually if it has a spout, that is a wet measure. And usually if it doesn't have a spout, that is a dry measure. Be sure when you measure your ingredients for anything, not just this, that if it says, if it's a dry ingredient like salt or, like flour or sugar or something, you use a dry measure. And if it's water, milk, liquid, then you use a wet measure. And this is a wet measure. You can tell by the spout. Now here's some of my stuff already in there. And I'm getting ready to add my flour now. I've got it already measured out. There we go. See, you can see that oat bran and flaxseed meal. And I just substituted, I did put a little bit of rye flour in there, but when you want to substitute for stuff like that flaxseed meal and that oat bran and stuff, you still got to keep your regular bread flour a little on the high side, because those other flours do not have as much gluten in them, and your bread won't come out as good if you don't compensate for that. So I'm still using 1½ cups of bread flour, but instead of using 1½ cups of rye flour, I am using some rye flour, flaxseed meal, oat bran, and wheat bran. So now the next thing I need to add is my 1½ teaspoons of dry. Okay, again, I've added everything there on the list. And here it is in the bread pan, and I'm getting ready to turn it on, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, here it is in the bread pan. I let the bread machine do all the work. And as you can see, it's a little bit on the sticky side, but that's okay. Now in the summertime, I'll let it do the whole bread cycle in the bread machine. But in the wintertime, I can use the heat from the stove to help heat the house. So I'm only putting it on dough and pasta, and then I'm going to finish it in the oven myself. And I'll show you how I do that. But the most important thing when you're cooking is be sure to use wet measures for wet ingredients, dry measures for dry ingredients. A lot of people, they may find their recipes don't work for some reason, and it may very well be because they're using the wrong measuring utensils. Now sometimes I used water, but sometimes I do use milk. Sometimes I add an egg in there, and I also use my powdered eggs. But this is the basic recipe, and you watch when we get back, you'll see how good it looks. So we'll be back when it's finished rising, in the first rise in the bread machine. Okay, here it is after an hour and 20 minutes in the bread machine. Bread machine did the first rise and everything. Now this is what I do. I start the bread machine again like it's going to be doing dough, and I let it do the kneading to get all that extra gas out. And I'll show it to you when it gets done. Okay, here is after my bread machine did another knead. Now all this knead does is get the extra bubbles out. I've got my pan waiting here, and I've greased it. All this is a restaurant steam table pan. It makes a nice loaf. And in the bottom there, I've got the pan greased really good with some olive oil. I've got some crushed up sunflower seeds. I've got some sesame seeds. And I got a little bit of rosemary. So here's the bread. It did the dough cycle on the bread machine. And then I let the bread machine do another knead cycle. So it kneaded all the extra air out. So I'm getting ready to put it in here. Okay, here it is after I've shaped it in a loaf, and I put it in my bread pan here, and I rolled it over, so now that the sesame seeds and the crushed sunflower seeds and the rosemary is all over, but there's still plenty more for it to pick up when it rises. Now this is how I rise my bread in the winter time. I turn my oven on as high as it'll go, and of course the light out. And then when I see the flame come on, in just a second I'm going to shut this off so I don't run out of battery. Okay, I don't know if you can see it or not, but you can see how the flame's starting. Okay, that's good. So now I'm going to shut the oven off. I'm going to turn on the light, and my bread is going to rise in the oven for 2 hours. Now that's how I do it in the winter time, because now I'm going to use my oven heat. That's how I do it in the winter time, because I'm going to use my oven heat when I cook the bread to help heat up the house. So there we are. We'll be back in about 2 hours when the loaf has risen. Okay, the bread has been rising now for 2 hours. Here it is. And or just about 2 hours, about an hour and a half. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my oven to about 375, 400. And I'm going to let my oven heat up for a good 15 minutes to make sure it's nice and hot. So we'll be back. Okay, the oven's been on, well, I don't have any numbers anymore. I wore the numbers off cleaning the knob. about 375, 400 for about 15 minutes. So the bread's ready to go in, but I need to score the top. Well, now instead of scoring it, just a second, I'll be back. Okay, instead of scoring it, I like to use a pair of scissors. Now it deflates a little bit, but that's okay. And now I'm going to put it in the oven. And it's going to stay in the oven about 30 minutes. So we'll be back when we take it out. Okay, it's time to take the bread out of the oven. So, here it is. We're going to test it. Sounds hollow. So it's ready. Ow, it's hot. So, gonna let it sit right here. Ooh. Just a second. Ow! Sit right there for a minute. Let it cool off. Turn the oven off. Some of the stuff came off of it. Did not stick to the pan, but it does sound hollow, so it's ready. And we'll be back when we cut into it. But that's a real nice looking loaf, don't you think? Here's the bread. It's cooled down enough for me to make a slice on it. So I'm going to make a slice. Okay, it's nice and soft, fluffy, and it's brown from the cocoa. So here is a recap. Use 1 cup of water, 2 tablespoons vegetable oil, 2 tablespoons molasses, 1 tablespoon gluten, 1 tablespoon sugar, 1/2 teaspoon salt, 1 tablespoon caraway seeds if you have them, 2 tablespoons unsweetened cocoa powder. You can leave that out. Then you're going to use 1.5 cups of rye flour, 1.5 cups of bread flour, and 1.5 teaspoons of dry yeast. Now, in this particular bread, the 1.5 cups of rye flour, I substituted wheat bran, oat bran, and then flaxseed meal. And I do different things with this bread, but I always keep that 1.5 cup of bread flour, and then that 1.5 cup of rye flour. That's where I get crazy and substitute whatever I want to. And as you can see, it's just really nice. In just a second, I want to have Ernie try some. Okay, here's Ernie's sandwich. I made him a sandwich. Ham and egg. So go ahead. So, how's the bread taste? He's got his mouth full. Just a second. So see, that bread is real nice and soft and makes good sandwiches. So how does the bread taste?
Nice.
Nice?
Yeah.
Real good?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's it. There's my bread. I'm going to make myself a bologna and ham sandwich. So that's it. And today's Christmas Day. Bye.